The operating room lights blazed overhead as Brandon Miller lay conscious on the surgical table, local anesthesia numbing only the surface of his neck. His weathered hands gripped the armrests, knuckles white, as Dr. Sarah Mitchell positioned her forceps over the wound that had consumed his life for 4 weeks. Through the observation window, his wife Emily pressed both palms against the glass, unable to look away. "Almost there," Dr. Mitchell murmured, her voice tight with concentration. Then it emerged, something white, alive, writhing. The larva twisted in the forceps, covered in tiny black hooks, fighting against extraction with violent spasms. It was the size of a large bean, impossibly alive, impossibly real. Emily's scream tore through the corridor. Brandon's face drained of color as he glimpsed the creature that had been living inside him, feeding on his flesh. But this nightmare had begun 4 weeks earlier, with something as innocent as a camping trip and a husband's simple words, "It's just a mosquito bite, Em." Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 4 weeks earlier, the Miller home sat quiet in the Saturday morning light of Oak Ridge, Tennessee. The modest 2-story house had weathered 46 years of marriage, its front porch bearing witness to countless sunsets watched from 2 rocking chairs, whose armrests showed worn patches where hands had clasped year after year. Inside, the kitchen smelled of cornbread baking. Emily Miller's Sunday tradition started a day early. At 65, she moved through her domain with the precision of ritual, silver hair pulled into a neat bun, gentle eyes missing nothing. The blue chambray shirt hung freshly ironed on the bedroom door, waiting for Brandon to wear it as he had every morning for decades. But this morning, the shirt remained untouched. Brandon Miller stood at the bathroom mirror, his lean frame still carrying the posture of military service despite his 68 years. A faded Y-shaped scar marked his right shoulder, souvenir of shrapnel from Kherson, 1969. His weathered hands touched the small red bump on his neck, just below the jawline, and he frowned. "Just a mosquito bite," he muttered to his reflection. They had returned yesterday from Cherokee National Forest, a camping trip to celebrate 10 years since his PTSD nightmares had finally stopped. Or so he told Emily. The anniversary had been perfect. Fishing, hiking, Brandon actually laughing under the stars. Emily had seen glimpses of the young man she married in 1978, the one who came home from Vietnam but took decades to truly return. In the kitchen, Emily set out hydrocortisone cream beside Brandon's coffee mug without comment. She had learned long ago that her husband responded better to quiet offerings than direct confrontation. The coffee maker beeped at precisely 5 o'clock, as it had every morning since Brandon's discharge from the Army. Some habits never died. Photographs lined the hallway, military service photos mixed with family moments, a visual timeline of their life together. One frame sat face down on the dresser. Their daughter, Jennifer, turned away 3 years ago after words Brandon still regretted. Under their bed, barely visible, sat a dented metal box with a rusty lock. Brandon checked it every morning with the same ritual precision he used to make his bed with hospital corners. He never opened it, just confirmed its presence, then pushed it back into shadow. On the refrigerator, VA hospital appointment cards gathered dust under magnets, ignored reminders of benefits Brandon refused to claim. Pride, Emily knew, or shame. Perhaps both. The radio played low from the kitchen counter, a weather forecast predicting unusually warm fall temperatures. The announcer mentioned something about tropical insects migrating northward due to climate change, but Emily paid it no attention as she pulled the cornbread from the oven. Brandon emerged from the bedroom, scratching absently at his neck. He still hadn't put on the blue shirt. Emily noticed but said nothing. simply sliding a plate of eggs across the counter and watching her husband of 46 years avoid her eyes. Something was already wrong. She just didn't know how wrong. Not yet. The memory of that evening by the campfire haunted Brandon now, though he hadn't recognized its significance at the time. They had been sitting beside the lake as darkness fell, the firelight dancing across Emily's face in a way that reminded him why he'd fallen in love 46 years ago. For once, Vietnam felt distant. The nightmares that had plagued him for decades had finally loosened their grip, or so he believed. Then the fly appeared. It was larger than normal, persistent, circling his head with unusual determination. Brandon swatted at it repeatedly, but it kept returning, buzzing near his neck with almost aggressive intent. "Persistent little bugger," he had joked, slapping at it one final time. Like Charlie in the jungle? Emily's smile had faded. "Don't talk about the war on our happy trip." He had apologized and they'd gone to bed. But that night, lying in the tent, Brandon had felt a tiny bump forming on his neck. Just a mosquito bite, he'd assured himself. He'd had far worse in Vietnam. By Monday morning, the bump had grown to the size of a pencil eraser, red and slightly tender. Brandon examined it briefly in the mirror, then dismissed it entirely. Emily set out hydrocortisone cream beside his untouched coffee cup, but he waved it away. "Mosquito bite, Em. Had worse in Nam." Tuesday brought no improvement. The bump developed a dark center, and a faint reddish ring began spreading outward from the site. When Brandon finally looked it up online, relief washed over him. The distinctive bullseye pattern meant Lyme disease, common in Tennessee, easily treated with antibiotics. He showed Emily the comparison photos on his laptop screen. "See? Just Lyme disease. Common around here." Emily studied his neck with concern. "Shouldn't you see a doctor?" "Already looked it up. Just needs antibiotics. I'll go to the pharmacy." Thursday afternoon found Brandon at Miller's Pharmacy on Main Street, where old Sam Jenkins had known him for 20 years. Sam examined the wound and nodded knowingly. "Yeah, that's textbook Lyme. Got the classic target shape. Here's the antibiotic cream, but if it doesn't improve in a week, you need to see Dr. Patterson." Brandon bought the cream, vindicated in his self-diagnosis. He applied it religiously that evening, expecting the bump to shrink within days. Instead, it grew. By Friday, the site had swelled to the size of a nickel, angry red, radiating heat to the touch. Brandon continued applying cream, insisting to Emily that these things took time. She bit her tongue but couldn't hide the anxiety in her eyes. She noticed other changes. The blue chambray shirt hung unworn for the third consecutive day. His coffee cup sat half full on the counter each morning, an unprecedented waste from a man who never left anything unfinished. He moved stiffly, avoiding turning his head, and she found bloodstains on his pillowcase from unconscious scratching in sleep. Sunday morning, Emily baked cornbread as always. Brandon didn't come to the table. She found him in the bathroom, frozen before the mirror, staring at a wound now the size of a quarter. The center looked disturbingly dark, almost hollow. "Brandon," she said quietly, "that's not Lyme disease. I said I'm handling it. I'm calling Jennifer." His voice turned sharp. "No, don't bother her." It was their first real argument in months, and it ended with Brandon slamming the bathroom door. Emily stood in the hallway, trembling, knowing with terrible certainty that something was deeply, horribly wrong. That night, Brandon dreamed of the jungle for the first time in years. Monday night, Brandon lay awake beside Emily, unable to find sleep. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. Against his neck he felt a rhythmic sensation that didn't match his pulse. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. He slipped from bed and went to the bathroom, closing the door softly. The fluorescent light flickered on, harsh and clinical, triggering a flash of memory. Field Hospital, Saigon, 1969. He gripped the sink until the moment passed, then forced himself to look in the mirror. The wound had changed. The dark center now appeared to have a tiny opening, no larger than a pinprick. As Brandon stared, barely breathing, the skin around it seemed to rise and fall with a movement independent of his own breathing. His hands began to shake, the first time Emily had seen such tremors since his worst PTSD years. The bathroom door opened. Emily stood there in her nightgown, hair down around her shoulders, worry etched across her face. "Let me see," she whispered. They stood together before the mirror, watching in horrified silence as the wound performed its subtle, terrible rhythm. Emily's reflection turned pale. "Brandon," her voice barely audible, "there's something alive in there." He met her eyes in the mirror. The walls he'd maintained for 50 years crumbled in an instant. "I'm scared." She took his hand, 46 years of marriage in that grip. "We're going to the doctor, first thing tomorrow." At 8 o'clock Tuesday morning, Emily called Dr. Patterson's office. The receptionist's cheerful voice grated against her rising panic. "Earliest appointment is Thursday at 2. This is urgent. Is he bleeding or unconscious?" "No, but there's something. Thursday at 2 is the best we can do, Mrs. Miller." Emily made the appointment, hands shaking with frustration. Meanwhile, Brandon sat at his laptop, searching desperately for answers. Something moving under skin brought up results that made his stomach turn. Parasitic infections, botfly larvae, warble flies. But all the information pointed to Central and South America, rarely North America. They hadn't left Tennessee. He found a more palatable explanation. "Maybe it's the old shrapnel," he told Emily that afternoon. "Could be causing nerve damage." Emily looked at him steadily. "The shrapnel is in your shoulder, not your neck. Nerves are connected, Em. Everything's connected." He wanted so badly to believe it. The alternative was too horrifying to contemplate. Wednesday morning, while Brandon showered, Emily made a phone call she'd been dreading. "Honey, I need you to come home." Jennifer's voice came cautious through the phone. "Mom, you know Dad doesn't want to see me." "I don't care what he wants. Something's wrong and he's too stubborn to get proper help." "Is it the PTSD?" Emily's voice broke. "I don't know what it is. Please just come." The fear in her mother's voice decided it. "I'll be there tomorrow morning." Thursday arrived with Jennifer's sedan pulling into the driveway at 9. Brandon saw it from the kitchen window, and his jaw tightened. When she entered carrying a medical bag, he assumed what Emily had told him, that their daughter was a dermatologist who could help. Neither woman corrected this belief. Jennifer, Dad. 3 feet of distance separated them, no embrace, no warmth, just the formality of strangers who shared blood. Emily broke the tension. "Show her your neck, Brandon." Jennifer approached with professional detachment, examining the wound with careful fingers. Brandon winced at her touch. The site was now inflamed, hot, the central opening more pronounced. "How long has this been present?" Her voice was clinical, controlled. 2 weeks. "Any fever? Night sweats?" Brandon hesitated. "Some." She studied the wound silently, her medical training warring with the emotion of seeing her father vulnerable. Finally, she looked at Emily. "Can I speak with you in the kitchen?" Once out of Brandon's earshot, Jennifer's professional mask cracked. "Mom, that's not a normal infection. Dad needs to see a specialist today. He has an appointment with Dr. Patterson at 2. "That's not enough. I'm calling someone I know at University Medical Center." Emily gripped her daughter's hand. "Thank you for coming." Jennifer's eyes betrayed what her words wouldn't. "I came for you, not him." But her concern for her father was written plainly across her face. Thursday afternoon at Dr. Patterson's office brought little comfort. The elderly physician had known Brandon for 20 years, treated him for everything from bronchitis to the lingering effects of Agent Orange exposure. But as he examined the wound on Brandon's neck, his weathered face showed genuine confusion. The site had progressed alarmingly. Now, the size of a dime, it wept clear fluid, and the central opening had become more pronounced, approximately 2 millimeters across. Dr. Patterson prodded gently around the edges, and Brandon couldn't suppress a wince. "I've never seen anything quite like this," the doctor admitted, straightening up. "We'll run cultures, blood work, basic imaging. I'm prescribing a stronger topical antibiotic and oral antibiotics as well." "What do you think it is?" Emily asked from her chair in the corner. "Could be an unusual bacterial infection, possibly fungal. The antibiotics should help. If there's no improvement in 3 days, we'll refer you to dermatology." Brandon left with prescriptions clutched in his hand, wanting desperately to believe that pills would solve everything. But Jennifer had already set other wheels in motion. That evening she contacted Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an infectious disease specialist she'd met at medical conferences over the years. Jennifer's work in veteran psychology occasionally intersected with complex medical cases, and Dr. Mitchell had always been generous with consultations. She sent photographs of the wound via secure medical channels. Dr. Mitchell's response came within the hour. "Can you get him in tomorrow? I want to see this personally." Friday and Saturday passed in a fog of deteriorating hope. Brandon took his antibiotics religiously, applied the cream as directed, but the wound only worsened. Pain radiated from the site now, and the surrounding tissue felt unnaturally hard. He developed a low-grade fever that left him fatigued, moving through the house like a ghost of himself. Emily watched helplessly as her husband weakened. The blue chambray shirt remained on its hanger, a silent testimony to Brandon's decline. His coffee sat untouched each morning. He slept poorly, and she woke repeatedly to find him scratching unconsciously at his neck, sometimes drawing blood. Jennifer stayed in her childhood bedroom, unchanged since she'd left home. Pink wallpaper she'd picked at 15, posters of bands long forgotten, a bookshelf full of high school yearbooks. She and Brandon moved around each other like planets on a collision course, carefully maintaining distance. Meals became exercises in painful silence, with Emily desperately trying to bridge the chasm between father and daughter. "Brandon, Jennifer asked if you'd like more tea," Emily would say, though Jennifer sat right there at the table. Neither could look directly at the other. Years of estrangement had built walls too high to scale in a few days. Saturday night brought the return of Brandon's nightmares. Emily woke to him thrashing beside her, crying out names she recognized from his war stories. "Tommy, get down! They're in the trees!" She shook him awake. "Brandon, you're home. You're safe." He sat up, disoriented, drenched in sweat. His hand went instinctively to his neck. "Something's in there, Em. Just like in the jungle. Something always finds a way in." Jennifer appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. For a moment, their eyes met, father and daughter, separated by years of hurt. Then Brandon noticed her and looked away. Jennifer retreated to her room. Monday morning arrived with a trip to University Medical Center, a sprawling, modern facility that made Brandon visibly uncomfortable. Large hospitals triggered memories of the field hospital in Saigon, the antiseptic smell, the fluorescent lights, the organized chaos of trauma care. Emily held his hand as they navigated the corridors. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's office was clean, professional, warmly lit to put patients at ease. The doctor herself was in her mid-40s, competent and kind, with the direct manner of someone who valued honesty. "Mr. Miller, I'm going to examine the area. Please tell me if anything I do increases the pain." She used a magnifying glass and special lighting, studying the wound with intense focus. Her expression shifted, surprise quickly masked by professional composure. "Have you traveled outside the United States recently?" "No, just camping in Cherokee National Forest." "Any international travel in the past 6 months?" Brandon hesitated, and Emily caught it immediately. "Brandon?" "Well," he said slowly, "I went to Louisiana 3 months ago." Emily's voice sharpened. "Louisiana? When?" "You said Louisiana?" Dr. Mitchell leaned forward with sudden interest. Brandon's face flushed with discomfort. "I visited an old Army buddy. Just a weekend trip." "You didn't tell me." Emily's hurt was palpable. "I didn't want you to worry." "Worry? I worry when you lie to me." Jennifer witnessed her parents' first real fight in her presence, seeing dynamics she'd never understood as a child. Dr. Mitchell intervened gently. "Louisiana changes things significantly. Mr. Miller, I believe you have a parasitic larval infestation, most likely botfly." Brandon's face went pale. "A maggot?" "Similar, but from a live fly. The female lays eggs on a carrier insect, usually a mosquito. When that mosquito bites you, the larvae enter through the puncture wound and develop under your skin." Emily's hand covered her mouth. "There's a worm living in him?" "A larva, yes. They can develop for several weeks beneath the skin. I need to examine you for additional sites." "Additional?" Brandon's voice cracked. The full-body examination revealed what they all feared. A second bump on Brandon's upper back, smaller and less developed, but unmistakable. Emily gasped. Jennifer's professional composure wavered. "How many?" Brandon asked quietly. "Let me complete the examination." She found a third site on his left shoulder blade, then a fourth near his right shoulder, disturbingly close to the old shrapnel scar. 4 sites total. 4 larvae developing beneath his skin. Dr. Mitchell explained with careful precision. "This is consistent with multiple bites during a single exposure event. The good news is they're not reproducing inside you. These are 4 separate larvae that will eventually mature and attempt to exit. The bad news is we cannot allow natural emergence, especially for the one on your neck." She pointed to the wound that had started everything. "This is very close to your carotid artery. If it burrows deeper while trying to emerge, you could experience catastrophic bleeding." The silence that followed was suffocating. Dr. Mitchell outlined 3 options. First, the Vaseline occlusion method: suffocate the larvae, force them to surface for air, then extract them. Non-invasive, but only 60% effective, with risk of the larvae burrowing deeper if panicked. Second, surgical extraction under anesthesia. 99% success rate, but expensive and invasive. Third, wait for natural emergence in 2 to 3 weeks, which the doctor immediately ruled out as too dangerous given the neck wound's location. "Let's discuss cost," Dr. Mitchell said, pulling up Brandon's insurance information. Between your VA coverage and Medicare, your estimated responsibility would be around $8,000 for the surgical option. Brandon's face hardened. 8,000? We'll pay it, Emily said firmly. That's the money for what, Brandon? For my funeral expenses after you bleed to death? Jennifer interrupted. I'll pay for it. Absolutely not, Brandon snapped. Dad, for once just accept I don't need your charity. The old wound between them ripped open, raw and bleeding. Dr. Mitchell raised her hands. Let's try option 1 first. If the Vaseline method works, we save money and avoid surgery. If it doesn't, we proceed to surgical extraction. But this is time-sensitive. The neck larva is most developed. We do this tomorrow. They agreed with reluctant nods, a fractured family united only by crisis. Tuesday morning found them in an outpatient procedure room. Brandon lay on an examination table while Emily and Jennifer waited outside, unable to watch. Dr. Mitchell worked with calm efficiency, coating the neck wound heavily with petroleum jelly. The theory is simple, she explained to Brandon. The larva needs oxygen. When we block its breathing hole, it should surface to breathe, and we can extract it. 15 minutes passed with agonizing slowness. Brandon felt pressure, movement, a crawling sensation that made his skin prickle with revulsion. I can see movement, Dr. Mitchell said. It's responding. Then everything went wrong. Instead of surfacing, the larva panicked and burrowed deeper. Brandon cried out as sharp pain lanced through his neck. Dr. Mitchell's face tightened with professional concern. It's trying to escape the obstruction. I need to make an incision. Now! Do it! Brandon gasped. She worked quickly, injecting local anesthetic around the site, but there wasn't time for it to fully take effect. Brandon gripped the armrests until his knuckles turned white as she made a small incision. He could feel everything. The tug of forceps, the pressure, the violation of his own body being opened. Almost there. Got it. The larva emerged writhing in the forceps, white and segmented, covered in tiny black hooks. It was the size of a large bean, obscenely alive. Dr. Mitchell dropped it into a specimen container where it continued to move with desperate energy. Brandon was shaking, in shock from pain and horror. 3 sutures closed the wound. His neck throbbed with each heartbeat. In the waiting room, Emily and Jennifer rushed in when called. Brandon sat pale and traumatized, a fresh bandage on his neck. Emily went to him immediately, pulling him into an embrace. Dr. Mitchell showed them the specimen container. Emily's scream echoed through the corridor, the sound that would haunt all their memories. Jennifer stared at the writhing larva with professional curiosity fighting visceral disgust. The remaining 3 will require surgical extraction, Dr. Mitchell said quietly. This proved that the gentle method is too risky. We'll schedule for Thursday. General anesthesia, all 3 removed at once. Brandon was too exhausted to argue about the cost. Wednesday passed in a fog of waiting. Brandon rested at home, neck bandaged, still acutely aware of the 3 larvae remaining in his body. He could feel them occasionally. Small movements, itching sensations that made his skin crawl. Jennifer handled the preoperative paperwork with quiet efficiency, playing the role of dutiful daughter while maintaining emotional distance. That evening, she found Brandon sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the metal box beneath it. Emily brought him tea. You thinking about opening it? After the surgery, when I wake up. You will wake up. Don't talk like that. If I don't... Brandon Miller, don't you dare say goodbye. He pulled her close. 46 years. Best decision I ever made. From the hallway, Jennifer watched her parents' intimacy and remembered when she was small, before everything changed. Tears streamed down her face. That night at 3 a.m, unable to sleep, she went to the kitchen and found Brandon there. "Want some coffee?" he asked. "You're not supposed to eat or drink before surgery." Old habits. Silence stretched between them. "Dad, about—" "After surgery," Brandon interrupted. "We'll talk, I promise." It was the first promise he'd made to her in 10 years. Thursday morning arrived with the sterile anxiety of surgical day. At 6 o'clock, Brandon and Emily pulled into the parking garage of University Medical Center, a sprawling complex that dwarfed the small-town hospital where Brandon usually received care. Jennifer had driven separately, arriving moments after them, her professional demeanor already in place like armor. Brandon's discomfort was immediately visible. His eyes tracked every exit sign, mapped escape routes with the instinct of someone trained for combat. When the public address system crackled to life with a routine announcement, he flinched. Emily took his hand. The preoperative room smelled of antiseptic and floor wax, institutional odors that transported Brandon instantly to 1969. He gripped the edge of the gurney as a nurse inserted his IV, fighting memories of field hospitals and blood-soaked gurneys. Emily stood close, her presence anchoring him to the present. Dr. Robert Hayes, the anesthesiologist, entered reviewing Brandon's chart. He was in his early 50s, with the calm competence of someone who'd handled thousands of cases. "Mr. Miller, I see you're a Vietnam veteran. Thank you for your service." Brandon nodded uncomfortably, as he always did when people thanked him. The gratitude never felt earned. "I need to review your medical history. Any foreign bodies or shrapnel still in your system? Shoulder, piece of mortar shell. Been there since '69. Dr. Hayes made careful notes. "We'll verify its position before anesthesia. Make sure everything's safe." Emily kissed Brandon's forehead. "I'll be right here when you wake up." Jennifer approached the bedside with visible hesitation. Brandon looked up at her and extended his hand. "See you on the other side, kid." The childhood nickname broke something in Jennifer's chest. She took his hand, squeezed hard. "See you soon, Dad." The anesthesiologist began the sedation. "Count backwards from 10 for me. 10, 9, 8. Brandon's last conscious thought was of the metal box under his bed, still locked, secrets still unspoken. Then darkness claimed him. In the surgical waiting room, Emily and Jennifer sat surrounded by other anxious families. The surgery was expected to take 2 hours. They had nothing to do but wait. The silence between them stretched uncomfortably until Jennifer finally broke it. "Mom, why did Dad and I stop talking? Really?" Emily looked at her daughter with surprise. "You don't know?" "I know what he said, that I made bad choices, that my divorce proved I didn't understand commitment. But that can't be everything." Emily sighed deeply. 46 years of secrets weighing on her. "It's not about you, honey. It never was." "What does that mean?" "Your father sees you and sees himself." "I don't understand." Emily chose her words carefully. "You left a marriage that was hurting you. That took courage. And he stayed in a war that was hurting him because he thought leaving was cowardly. Every choice you make to protect yourself reminds him of choices he didn't make." Jennifer's eyes widened. "So he's angry at me for being brave?" He's angry at himself. You're just easier to push away." The revelation hung between them. Then Emily continued, her voice dropping lower. "There was a sergeant, Tommy Reeves. He saved your father's life. He mentioned Tommy once when I was little. Tommy died because your father lived." Jennifer waited, barely breathing. "Survivor's guilt?" she finally asked. "Worse. Your dad could have rotated home a month earlier. He volunteered to stay. Tommy died in that extra month. Oh, God. He's carried that for 50 years. The metal box under our bed has Tommy's dog tags in it. Your dad promised to take care of Tommy's family, never did. Couldn't face them. Why are you telling me this now?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Because if something happens in that operating room, you deserve to know why he pushed you away. It's not you, sweetheart. It's the weight of a dead man he carries everywhere." Jennifer wept then, for her father, for the years lost, for pain she'd never understood. Emily held her daughter while families around them pretended not to notice. "He needs to tell you himself," Emily said quietly. "That's why the box is still locked. He's not ready. Will he ever be ready? I think that thing in his neck is forcing him to be." 90 minutes into the surgery, Dr. Mitchell and her surgical team worked with focused precision. The first larva came out of Brandon's upper back cleanly, dropped squirming into a specimen jar. The second, from his left shoulder blade, proved equally straightforward, but the third site, near the old shrapnel scar on his right shoulder, presented complications. As Dr. Mitchell dissected carefully around the larva, her scalpel encountered unexpected resistance. Metal. She used a retractor to expose the area more fully and stopped cold. "What the—" The shrapnel fragment that had been lodged in Brandon's shoulder since 1969 had moved. Not just shifted slightly, but migrated significantly toward his spine. It now pressed dangerously close to a major nerve bundle and the thoracic aorta. Dr. Mitchell called Dr. Hayes from the anesthesia station. "Robert, look at this." He examined the exposed area and his face went pale. "Jesus, that's right against the aorta. How is he not dead?" Shrapnel can migrate over decades. Usually it stops in muscle tissue. This one kept moving. If it punctures that artery, he bleeds out internally, minutes at most. They faced an immediate ethical dilemma. Dr. Hayes voiced it first. "We need to remove it, but that's not what we have consent for. It's life-threatening. It's been there 50 years. Technically, it's stable. Look at the imaging. It's moved 2 centimeters in the past month. Something's pushing it. Maybe infection from the larvae. Or coincidence." Dr. Mitchell's voice turned firm. "Robert, if we close him up and this thing shifts 1 more centimeter, he dies. At home. Suddenly. No goodbye." Emily only signed consent for larval extraction. She's next of kin. She can consent for additional procedures. They sent a nurse to the waiting room. Emily looked up sharply when her name was called, fear flooding her face. "Is he—" "He's stable, but Dr. Mitchell needs to speak with you." Moments later, Dr. Mitchell appeared still in surgical scrubs, mask pulled down. "Brandon is fine. The larvae are coming out successfully, but we've discovered something." She showed them images of the shrapnel against the aorta, explained in careful lay terms what they'd found. "I need your permission to remove it now while he's already under anesthesia." "Is it dangerous to remove?" "Yes, but more dangerous to leave it." Emily's voice shook. How much more dangerous? Dr. Hayes joined them. To remove it, there's a 15% risk of stroke or catastrophic bleeding. To leave it, there's a 70% risk of sudden death within a year. Jennifer started to speak. Mom, as a medical professional, Emily cut her off. As his wife, I decide. Then she looked at her daughter. But as his daughter, you should agree. Jennifer nodded. Remove it. Emily turned to the doctors. Do it. Save him, please. Back in the operating room, Dr. Hayes scrubbed in for what had become cardiac surgery. The shrapnel was corroded, fragmenting as they tried to extract it. For 45 tense minutes, they worked with painstaking care, removing the metal piece by tiny piece. Brandon's vitals fluctuated. His heart rhythm showed stress. But finally, the last fragment came free. They sutured him closed and moved him to recovery, still intubated, having been under anesthesia far longer than originally planned. 15 minutes later, with Brandon in the recovery room and Emily and Jennifer finally allowed to see him, the monitors began their terrible song. His heart rate, initially steady, became irregular, then rapid, then chaotic. A nurse rushed in, followed by two more. Fib, get the crash cart! Emily and Jennifer were pushed from the room. Through the window, they watched in horror as the medical team swarmed around Brandon. Chest compressions. The defibrillator charged. Clear! Brandon's body jerked. The monitor showed flatline. Clear! Another jolt. Still flatline. Emily screamed, No! Brandon! Jennifer held her mother back as they administered epinephrine. The third shock. Clear! 43 seconds of flatline. Dr. Hayes looked at the clock, preparing to call time of death. Then, beep, 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 beep. Brandon's heart found its rhythm again. He was alive, but barely. They moved him immediately to the ICU, induced a coma to allow his stressed heart to stabilize. Emily collapsed in Jennifer's arms, both women sobbing. The distance of 10 years dissolved in shared terror, in the recognition that they might lose him before either could make peace. Thursday night in the ICU passed in a blur of beeping monitors and hushed voices. Brandon lay motionless, surrounded by machines that breathed for him, tracked his heartbeat, measured every fragile function of his body. A ventilator tube disappeared down his throat. IV lines snaked from both arms. The man who had survived Vietnam, who had endured 50 years of survivor's guilt, looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. Emily refused to leave his side. She pulled a chair close and took his hand, holding it with the same fierce grip she'd used on their wedding day 46 years ago. Jennifer brought her mother food that went untouched, coffee that was accepted but barely sipped, clean clothes that Emily changed into quickly in the bathroom before rushing back, terrified he might wake in her absence. She talked to him constantly, filling the silence with memories. Remember our first date? You were so nervous you forgot to open the car door for me. But then you made up for it by opening every door for the next 6 months. The blue shirt is waiting for you at home. I ironed it fresh yesterday. We have 46 years together, Brandon. I need more. Please give me more. Jennifer watched her mother and saw a depth of love she'd never fully comprehended. Her own marriage had lasted only 3 years, ending in mutual relief rather than heartbreak. Maybe her father had been right to question it, not because divorce was wrong, but because she'd settled for something that paled next to what her parents shared. Every 4 hours, a different nurse checked Brandon's vitals. The updates became a grim ritual. Heart rate stable. Blood pressure acceptable. Still no sign of waking. These things take time. At 8 o'clock Friday morning, 36 hours after his heart had stopped, Dr. Hayes arrived with the latest assessment. Emily looked up with desperate hope in her eyes. "We're reducing the sedation gradually," he explained gently. "His body needs to decide to wake up on its own." "When will that happen? Hours? Days?" He paused, and Emily felt ice form in her chest. "Or he might not wake at all. Mrs. Miller, the arrest lasted 43 seconds. That's significant." "What does that mean?" "Possible brain damage. We won't know the extent until he regains consciousness. If he regains consciousness." After the doctor left, Emily finally broke. She'd held herself together for 2 days, been strong for Jennifer, maintained hope through sheer force of will. But now the weight of possibility crushed her. She collapsed against Brandon's chest, sobbing with abandon. "You promised we'd talk. You promised Jennifer. You promised to open that damn box. You don't get to die before keeping your promises." Jennifer appeared in the doorway. "Mom, he's leaving me. Just like Tommy left him. Just like everyone leaves." Jennifer entered and wrapped her arms around her mother. "He's not gone yet. Dad's stubborn. He'll fight." Friday afternoon, Emily sat hollow-eyed and exhausted. Jennifer insisted she take a break. 15 minutes. Go to the cafeteria. Get some air. I'll stay with him." Emily reluctantly agreed, too worn down to argue. Alone with her father, Jennifer took the chair Emily had occupied for 2 days. She held Brandon's hand, a gesture that felt strange after years of distance. His face looked peaceful despite the tubes and wires, the tension she'd always seen in him finally absent. She began talking, voice low and uncertain. "Dad, I know you can't hear me. Maybe that makes this easier." She told him about her conversation with Emily, about learning the truth of Tommy's death and the guilt Brandon had carried for 50 years. "I understand now why you pushed me away. My divorce reminded you of choices, didn't it?" Her voice strengthened as confession poured out. "But Dad, there's something you need to know. I became a psychologist because of you." She explained how she'd watched him suffer with PTSD, pretending to be fine while clearly drowning. How she'd wanted to help people like him, veterans carrying invisible wounds. "Every patient I treat, I'm trying to save you. Isn't that messed up?" Tears came then, hot and fast. "I'm not even a real doctor, Dad. I'm a therapist. Mom told you I was a dermatologist because she knew you'd reject a shrink. I let her lie because I wanted to see you." She gripped his hand tighter. "I miss you, Dad. I've missed you for 10 years. Please wake up. Please let me help you. Let me in." As she cried, head bowed over their clasped hands, she felt it. Tiny pressure. A squeeze. Her head jerked up. "Dad?" His eyes remained closed. Then another squeeze, unmistakable this time. "Dad? Can you hear me?" No other response. No flutter of eyelids. No change in breathing. But that pressure on her hand had been real. She ran to the door. "Nurse! I think he's waking up." The response was swift. Nurses checked vitals, measured responses, examined monitors with professional scrutiny. Dr. Hayes was paged and arrived within minutes. Did his eyes open? No, but he squeezed my hand. Twice. The doctor checked the EEG readings. "I'm sorry, but this still shows deep sedation level. There's no sign of consciousness. It wasn't involuntary. He responded to my voice." Dr. Hayes was gentle but firm. "I know you want to believe that. but medically, there's no indication he heard you." Emily rushed back from the cafeteria, seeing the gathered medical team. "What happened?" "I thought he squeezed my hand," Jennifer said, voice breaking. Emily went to Brandon's bedside, gripped his hand fiercely. "Honey? Brandon? Squeeze if you can hear me." Nothing. She glared at the doctor. "My daughter is not a liar." "I'm not suggesting she is, Mrs. Miller. But sometimes in these situations, we interpret normal muscle responses as intentional communication. We need to wait for concrete signs of awareness." The medical team dispersed, leaving mother and daughter alone with Brandon's silent form. Jennifer sank into a chair, devastated. Emily remained standing, still holding her husband's hand, refusing to release it. Hope raised and then crushed was worse than no hope at all. They settled back into waiting, into the terrible helplessness of watching someone you love hover between life and death while you could do nothing but hold their hand and pray. Friday night at 11:47, the ICU hummed with its usual mechanical symphony. Emily dozed in her chair, still holding Brandon's hand, her grip never loosening, even in sleep. Jennifer had finally surrendered to exhaustion on a waiting room couch. The world had narrowed to this single room, this single heartbeat displayed on monitors. Inside the darkness of his coma, Brandon floated. Voices reached him from far away, distorted and dreamlike. Emily's voice saying she needed more time. Jennifer's voice begging him to let her in. Then another voice, one he hadn't heard in 50 years but would recognize anywhere. Tommy. "Brother, it's time to let go." "Let go of what?" "The weight. You've carried me long enough." "I promised your family, Tommy. You kept your promise. You survived. You loved. You raised a daughter. That's enough." "Is it?" "Let go, Brandon. Wake up. They need you more than I do." His fingers twitched. Emily jerked awake, instantly alert despite bone-deep exhaustion. "Brandon?" His eyelids fluttered. Confusion clouded his face as consciousness returned. His eyes opened, unfocused, trying to make sense of tubes and machines. When he tried to speak, the ventilator tube prevented it. Panic flashed across his face. Emily stood quickly, leaning close. "You're okay. You're on a ventilator. Don't fight it. I'm calling the nurse." She pressed the call button repeatedly until staff rushed in. Within minutes, Dr. Hayes arrived to assess responsiveness. He held up a hand. "Mr. Miller, squeeze my hand." Brandon squeezed. "Good. Now follow my finger with your eyes." Brandon tracked the movement, slow but deliberate. "We're going to remove the breathing tube. Cough when I tell you." The extubation process left Brandon gasping, his throat raw. When he could finally speak, his voice came out as a rasp. Emily was crying and laughing simultaneously. "I'm here. I'm right here." "I'm right." A nurse went to wake Jennifer. She appeared moments later, running despite hospital rules, and stopped in the doorway when she saw her father's open eyes. He looked at her and extended his hand weakly. "Jenny," her childhood nickname. She went to him and took his hand. "Hi, Dad." "Heard you," he whispered. "The whole time. Heard you." Saturday morning brought Dr. Sarah Mitchell with laboratory results and a specialist Jennifer hadn't met. Dr. Harold Chen was introduced as a parasitologist who had examined the extracted larvae. "How are you feeling, Mr. Miller?" Dr. Mitchell asked. "Like I got hit by a truck," she smiled. "Close. You were hit by 4 parasites and 50-year-old shrapnel. I have some interesting findings from the lab." Dr. Chen stepped forward with a tablet showing microscopic images. "Mr. Miller, we've analyzed the specimens thoroughly. The larvae were 10 to 12 weeks old, not 3 to 4 weeks." Brandon looked confused. "But the camping trip was only a month ago." "Exactly," Dr. Mitchell said. "You weren't infected in Tennessee." Emily's eyes widened. "The Louisiana trip, 3 months ago." The memory came back to Brandon in pieces. "I went to visit Charlie's widow. First time in 50 years I went back south. Louisiana Bayou country is prime habitat for botfly species," Dr. Chen explained. "You were almost certainly infected there." "This matters," Dr. Mitchell continued, "because the larvae were developing far longer than we initially thought. The one near your carotid artery was days from full maturity. If it had emerged naturally while you were at home, it would have burrowed through the arterial wall." She paused to let that sink in. "You would have bled out in seconds." The room fell silent. Emily's hand tightened on Brandon's. Jennifer spoke quietly. "So the camping trip we all thought caused, this had nothing to do with it?" "Correct." Brandon turned to Emily, shame coloring his face. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Louisiana." "Why didn't you?" He struggled with the words. "Because I went to visit Tommy's daughter, his family, the people I promised to take care of and didn't." His voice broke. "After 50 years of hiding from them, I finally went. I told them I was sorry, that I lived when Tommy died." Tears streamed down his face. "His daughter looks just like him, Em. She's 52 now. Has grandkids. All the life Tommy never got to have." Emily's anger dissolved into understanding. "You went to make amends?" "I tried to." "And you didn't tell me because you were ashamed?" "Ashamed it took 50 years. Ashamed I broke my promise for 50 years. Dr. Chen cleared his throat gently. "Actually, Mr. Miller, those parasites may have saved your life." "What?" "The inflammation from the larval infection caused the shrapnel to shift position. That's what made it visible on imaging. Without the larvae, the shrapnel would have stayed hidden until it punctured your aorta. You would have died suddenly, with no warning and no chance to say goodbye." He gestured to Emily and Jennifer. "No chance to reconcile." Brandon stared at the doctor, trying to process the impossible irony. "A fly saved my life?" "Multiple flies, technically." Brandon laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound that turned into tears and then back to laughter. Emily and Jennifer joined him, the three of them caught between horror and relief, between grief and gratitude. That afternoon, moved to a regular recovery room, Brandon made a request. "Em, I need you to bring me the box." "Brandon, you need to rest." "I've rested 50 years, please." Emily looked at Jennifer, who nodded. "I'll get it. I need to go home for clothes anyway." While Emily was gone, father and daughter sat together in fragile silence. "Jenny, what you said when I was under. I heard all of it." She looked startled. "You did?" "About becoming a therapist because of me." Her face flushed. "I didn't mean to. It's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever done for me." "Dad, and I'm sorry for pushing you away, for being too broken to see you were trying to help. You're not broken. Yes, I am. But maybe that's okay. Maybe broken things can still work." Jennifer's confession came tumbling out. "Dad, I need to tell you something. I'm not a dermatologist." Brandon smiled weakly. "I know." "You know?" "Jenny, for weeks you asked about my dreams, my feelings, how I was sleeping. No skin doctor asks those questions. You let me lie? I let your mother protect you. She was afraid I'd reject help from a psychologist. Would you have? He paused, considering honestly. 10 years ago? Yes. Now I think I need exactly that kind of help. Really? Will you recommend someone? Someone who works with veterans? You mean it? I mean it. Emily returned with the metal box, dented and rust-stained. Brandon's hands shook as he took it, 50 years of weight concentrated in corroded metal. He'd carried a key on his keychain for decades, checking the box each morning but never opening it. Now his fingers fumbled with the lock. Inside lay the artifacts of his guilt. Tommy's dog tags reading Reeves, Thomas J., his own Purple Heart medal that he'd never felt worthy to accept. Photographs of young men in jungle fatigues, so many of them dead. A dried flower from Tommy's funeral in 1970, and a sealed envelope addressed to Jennifer. "This is for you," he said, handing her the letter. "I wrote it 10 years ago, after your divorce. Never had the courage to send it." Jennifer opened the envelope with trembling hands. As she read, tears fell onto the paper, smudging ink that had waited a decade to be seen. Emily read over her shoulder, crying too. The letter laid bare everything Brandon had locked away. His apology for being a distant father, the explanation of Tommy's death and how survivor's guilt had poisoned his ability to accept happiness. How seeing Jennifer happy had terrified him because he didn't feel he deserved a happy daughter when Tommy's daughter had grown up fatherless. How her divorce had broken his heart, not because she'd failed, but because he feared she'd inherited his inability to accept love. It ended simply, "You are the best thing I ever did. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry I couldn't be the father you deserved. But I love you. I have always loved you. Please don't stop trying to reach me." Jennifer showed the letter to Emily, who wept reading words her husband had written but couldn't speak. Then Jennifer did something she hadn't done in 10 years. She climbed carefully onto her father's hospital bed, Emily on his other side, and the three of them embraced. No words were necessary. The box was open. The secrets were out. The healing had begun. Brandon held his wife and daughter close, feeling lighter than he had in 50 years, as if extracting those larvae had removed more than just parasites. Tommy's voice echoed in his memory one last time. "Let go, brother." And finally, after half a century, Brandon did. 6 months later, spring morning light filtered through the windows of the Miller home, transforming the familiar space with warmth that felt earned rather than given. The blue chambray shirt hung freshly ironed on the bedroom door, and this time Brandon wore it. Emily hummed while making coffee, the ritual restored. From the living room, "You Send Me" played on the vinyl record player, Saturday tradition resumed after months of silence. Small changes told the story of transformation. On Brandon's neck, a thin scar remained barely visible, a reminder he touched occasionally without conscious thought. His shoulder bore a healing surgical scar where 50-year-old shrapnel had finally been removed. The medicine cabinet now held prescriptions for managing PTSD, taken daily without shame. The calendar on the refrigerator showed regular appointments with Dr. Richard Patterson, the therapist Jennifer had recommended who specialized in treating Vietnam veterans. A new photograph had appeared on the refrigerator, 3 generations together. Jennifer had brought her 2 children to visit last weekend, and they'd asked their grandfather about Vietnam. Brandon had answered honestly, age-appropriately, breaking the generational silence that had poisoned his family for decades. The metal box no longer hid beneath the bed. It sat openly on the bedroom dresser now, filled with fresh flowers from Emily's garden instead of dried ones from a funeral 50 years past. Tommy's dog tags were gone, finally laid to rest where they belonged. On the table lay a flyer for the VA support group that met every Tuesday evening. Brandon attended faithfully, finding unexpected peace in talking with other veterans who understood the weight of survival. His bedside table held a journal, pages filled with the neat handwriting Emily recognized from his letters during the war. The therapist had suggested writing, and Brandon had discovered that words on paper could carry what he'd never been able to speak aloud. The nightmares had stopped. Emily slept peacefully for the first time in years, no longer waking to Brandon's cries of "get down" or "incoming." He'd gained back the weight he'd lost during his illness, and something more remarkable. He smiled readily now, touched Emily with casual affection, talked more in a day than he once had in a week. The phone rang precisely at 10 o'clock Sunday morning, as it had every week for 6 months. Jennifer's call never missed. Father and daughter talked for an hour, rebuilding what had been broken with patience and honesty. In late April, Brandon made a request. "Em, I want to go to Washington, to the wall." Emily understood immediately. "I'll call Jennifer. She should come too." The trip to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial happened on a clear May morning. Brandon stood before the black granite wall, 58,000 names etched in stone, each one a life interrupted. Emily held his left hand, Jennifer his right. After 50 years, he'd finally come. They found Tommy's name on panel 27W, line 94. Thomas James Reeves. Brandon traced the letters with shaking fingers, then knelt and placed Tommy's dog tags at the base of the memorial. Beside them, he laid the Purple Heart medal he'd carried in shame for half a century. "These belong to you, brother," he whispered. "I carried them as long as I could." From his pocket, he pulled a folded letter and read aloud, his voice breaking but steady. "Dear Tommy, I'm sorry it took 50 years to say this. I'm sorry I lived and you didn't. I'm sorry I broke my promise to your family, but I finally met them, and they forgive me. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, but I'm not sorry anymore for surviving. I have a wife who loves me, a daughter who's trying to understand me, and maybe some years left to do better. I think you'd want that for me. Rest easy, Sergeant. Your work is done. Mine is just beginning." Jennifer placed flowers at the base of the wall, grown from seeds of the dried flower that had been locked in the box. Emily raised her hand in an imperfect civilian salute. Brandon stood at attention, his military salute precise after 50 years, tears streaming freely down his weathered face. A moment of profound silence. Then an older veteran approached, himself walking with a cane, wearing a faded 101st Airborne cap. "Welcome home, brother." Brandon's voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you." This time, he meant it. They walked away from the wall together, Brandon between the two women he loved most. He didn't look back. Moving forward was the only direction that mattered now. The story rippled outward in ways Brandon never anticipated. Mitchell published a case study titled "Botfly Infestation in Tennessee, Climate Change Implications," raising awareness in the medical community about parasitic diseases appearing in new regions. Her work potentially saved others from misdiagnosis. Brandon began volunteering at the VA hospital, talking with other veterans about seeking help. His approach was characteristically blunt. "If a bug can force me to deal with my trauma, what's your excuse?" The humor worked. Veterans listened. Jennifer's children visited their grandparents monthly now, asking questions about Vietnam that Brandon answered with painful honesty. The cycle of silence that had damaged 2 generations would not claim a third. Quarterly visits to Louisiana became routine. Brandon had developed a genuine relationship with Tommy's daughter and her family, keeping his promise finally in the way that truly mattered. At their last visit, Tommy's daughter had held Brandon's hand and said, "He's proud of you." "I know he is." Local news had covered the story. Veterans' parasitic infection leads to life-saving surgery and family reconciliation. Other families reached out, their own stories of estrangement and eventual healing, creating ripples that spread far beyond Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Now, 6 months after surgery, Saturday evening found Brandon and Emily on their front porch. The sun set in brilliant orange and pink, painting the sky with the colors of hope. They sat in their rocking chairs, hands clasped between them. 46 years of marriage stronger for having been tested. "You Send Me" drifted through the open window. Jennifer's car pulled unexpectedly into the driveway. She joined them on the porch steps, settling into comfortable silence. Brandon broke it first. "Strange thing, life. A fly tried to kill me and ended up saving me." Emily squeezed his hand. "The fly didn't save you. You saved yourself. You just needed a push." Jennifer laughed. "A very gross, terrifying push." All 3 laughed together, the sound of healing made audible. "Best anniversary trip ever," Brandon said. "We're never camping again," Emily declared firmly. "Agreed." More laughter. Easier now. The sun touched the horizon, silhouetting 3 people who had found their way back to each other through horror and grace, through parasites and old shrapnel, through secrets finally spoken, and forgiveness finally offered. Brandon spoke softly. "Welcome home." Emily looked at him with gentle confusion. "We've been home, honey." Brandon smiled, truly smiled, looking at his wife and daughter. "I know, but I just got here." The rocking chairs continued their gentle motion as darkness fell. Empty now, but not lonely. Just resting, waiting for tomorrow. Sometimes the smallest things carry the biggest messages. Brandon's story reminds us that the walls we build to protect ourselves often become the prisons that isolate us from the people who love us most. For 50 years he carried guilt that wasn't his to bear, pushed away a daughter who only wanted to understand him, and convinced himself that asking for help was weakness. How many of us do the same? We tell ourselves we're fine when we're drowning. We maintain our pride while our families drift further away. We lock our pain in metal boxes and hide them under the bed, checking them every morning but never finding the courage to open them. Brandon nearly died before he learned what we all need to understand. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the bridge to healing. The blue shirt his wife ironed every day wasn't just fabric. It was love made visible, waiting patiently for him to accept it. His daughter didn't need him to be perfect. She needed him to be present. What boxes are you keeping locked? What shirts are hanging unworn in your life? Who's been waiting for you to just let them in? Share your thoughts below. Have you ever let pride stand between you and the people you love? What finally helped you break down those walls?